This is a deeply troubling story that speaks to grief, politics, identity, and anger. On October 2, 2025, during Yom Kippur, a tragic attack unfolded at the Heaton Park Hebrew Congregation Synagogue in Manchester. A man drove a vehicle toward worshippers, then attacked with a knife. In the end, two Jewish men, Adrian Dalby, 53, and Melvin Kravitz, 66, were killed and others injured. The attacker, identified as Jihad al-Shami, was shot dead by police. In the wake of that horror, a public vigil was held near the synagogue. It was meant to be a moment of mourning, solidarity, and defiance against hate. But as the UK Deputy Prime Minister David Lammy took to the stage, he was met with boos, jeers, and shouts of "Shame on you! You have blood on your hands, and you've allowed it to grow on the campuses." What happened that day at the vigil reveals fractures, frustrations, and fears. In this video, we'll walk through the facts of the attack, the moments at the vigil, the arguments on both sides, and what this moment may signal for the state of communal trust and political accountability in Britain today. The attack itself was swift and brutal. It began around 9:31 a.m. when the assailant rammed his vehicle into pedestrians. Then he exited and began stabbing congregants. Police arrived quickly, and within 7 minutes, by 9:38 a.m., he was shot and killed. Investigators have reported that one of the victims, Adrian Dalby, may have been shot accidentally by police while attempting to block access to the synagogue doors. Those inside had attempted to barricade doors to prevent the attacker's entry. The suspect, Jihad al-Shami, was 35 years old, a naturalized British citizen born in Syria. He had been on bail for an alleged rape at the time of the attack. He was not previously known to the country's counterterrorism apparatus, which has raised questions about how someone with apparent extremist inclinations could slip through the cracks. Authorities believe there may have been Islamist ideological influence, though investigations are ongoing. In the aftermath, multiple arrests were made up to 6 individuals in relation to the attack. The Independent Office for Police Conduct (IOC) has launched inquiries into whether police actions might have contributed to the death of Dalby. The political response has been swift. Prime Minister Keir Starmer has pledged increased protection for Jewish communities and pressed calls for unity across faiths. So that is the grim background. Now let's return to the vigil itself, where grief and anger collided. As the vigil commenced, leaders aimed to offer a space for mourning and reflection. Speakers acknowledged the horror of the attack, the bravery of those who resisted the attacker, and the pain felt by the community. But when David Lammy was introduced, the mood shifted sharply. Some in the crowd erupted in boos and heckles before he could even begin. One overriding refrain was "Shame on you." Another was "You have blood on your hands." Some accused him, directly and indirectly, of enabling antisemitism to flourish in the country through his political stance or inaction. Protesters quoted his positions on campus policies, pro-Palestine marches, and the government's handling of antisemitism. One person shouted, "You enabled it every Saturday." Others demanded Lammy leave the stage. Lammy attempted to address the crowd, speaking of solidarity, grief, and defiance. He said, "We stand with you against those who think bombs or blades will break us." He cited his personal experiences with suffering from past terror attacks in Britain, and he pledged that all faiths and communities must unite against extremism. But his words were repeatedly drowned out by heckling. At points, the crowd would not let him proceed. Eventually, the chair of the Jewish Representative Council in Greater Manchester intervened, trying to calm the crowd and acknowledge the pain while allowing Lammy a chance to speak. Why did this happen? There are a few overlapping currents. First, this moment reflects deep frustration from Jewish communities who feel that the state, political leaders, and society have allowed anti-Semitic sentiment and worse to grow unchecked. The vigil was not only for mourning a terror attack, but also a moment for the community to express long-held grievances that their fears, their calls for protection, and their pleas for recognition have not always been heard. Second, Lammy is not a neutral figure in these debates. As Deputy Prime Minister, his party is under scrutiny over how it has handled pro-Palestine protests, campus activism, and incidents of antisemitism in the UK. Some attendees clearly viewed him as symbolic of the broader political establishment that they blame for failing to curb hate speech or enforce protection for Jewish communities. The jeers at him were as much political as they were personal. Third, grief and trauma create a volatile emotional atmosphere. At a vigil, people are raw, vulnerable, unsure, angry, and looking for accountability. The presence of a high-ranking political figure, especially one whose policies or words may be contested, can bring those emotions to the surface. In that fragile space, past wounds, resentments, and fears can erupt. Fourth, there is a sense of betrayal. Some mourners felt that the broader public solidarity shown in moments of crisis is ephemeral, that in quieter moments, the safety of Jewish communities has not been prioritized. The heckling can be seen as saying, words aren't enough. Where were you before this day? Where will you be tomorrow? Of course, from Lammy's side, the intention was to offer solidarity and reassure Jewish citizens that the state stands with them. He framed terrorism as a shared threat and urged all communities to resist forces that would divide. In his view, the vigil was a moment not just for mourning, but for collective resolve. His attempt to speak amidst the heckling suggests that he understood the symbolic weight of his office in moments like this, and was determined to try to respond, even under pressure. But the confrontation also exposed how fragile the bonds of trust are. A political leader's presence may be welcomed by some but deeply resented by others, especially those who feel marginalized or betrayed. The fragmentation in the crowd illustrates how a communal moment of sorrow can become a stage for unresolved tensions. What might this moment signal for the UK more broadly? It suggests that mourners and marginalized communities are holding leaders accountable not just for rhetorical statements, but for long-term consistency, policy, and protection. In periods of crisis, solidarity can be performative, but what people demand is persistent care, security, and responsiveness on the ground. It also underscores how public grief is intertwined with politics. A vigil is not pure. Politics, identity, and power always intrude. When people are mourning, they may also want to name those they see as complicit in enabling the conditions for violence to emerge. Moreover, this moment may influence how future vigils and public memorials are organized. Who speaks, when, and how to manage the tension between mourning and protest. It raises questions about whether political figures should address congregations in moments of public grief, or whether those moments are better left to community voices. And finally, it confronts a central tension. Can a society unite in grief without silencing dissent? Can political leaders engage communities without being flattening figures who dilute the anger and demands of those they seek to console? As we reflect, we should let the pain of the moment guide us toward empathy. The people at that vigil were not simply protesting Lammy. They were hurt by loss, by fear, by long years of feeling vulnerable. They were speaking from a place of anguish, demanding to be heard. And while their anger may not be comfortable, it reveals how much trust is broken, how much needs to be rebuilt. If we're making this video for you, our viewers, here's what I hope we take away. We must resist simplifying this into angry mob vs. politician. This was a fraught moment born of deep grief, deep political fractures, and a profound sense of vulnerability. We should hold space for those emotions, even as we demand accountability from leaders. We should also press leaders, not just in times of crisis, but always, to listen, protect, and act. Symbols matter, but so does consistency. Words of solidarity are necessary, but they are not sufficient if communities continue to feel unsafe. We need to see Jewish communities not only when tragedy strikes, but in everyday life, with their fears, their hopes, their histories. Their safety is a societal responsibility, not a niche issue, and we must recognize how communal memories of exclusion, persecution, and abandonment shape how public gestures are received. We have to acknowledge that these moments of division, no matter how explosive, are also opportunities. They expose fractures, they name weaknesses, and they can prompt renewed conversations about justice, inclusion, security, and respect. To those who were at that vigil and experienced shock, grief, or frustration, your voice matters. And to leaders listening now, your presence in sorrow must be matched by your presence in service, in accountability, in protection.